The mother of a powerful CEO disguised herself as a cleaner to test the woman her son was about to marry. What she discovered shocked everyone. In the shining lobby of the tower, she spilled a bucket of water on purpose. But instead of compassion, she was met with scorn. Monica, the glamorous fiancée, looked down in disgust, kicked the bucket across the floor, and her friend struck the old woman's side. The entire hall froze in silence. Clara did not fight back. She simply bent down again, wiping the marble floor with calm dignity. That quiet strength revealed more than any scream could. If you were standing there, how would you have reacted? Share your thoughts in the comments and stay with us to see what happens next. Wishing you a kind and peaceful day. The morning light spilled across the glass facade of Brookfield Tower, bathing the lobby in a polished glow that seemed to mirror the perfection the building wished to project. It was a weekday rush, and the air hummed with the steady rhythm of footsteps, distant elevator chimes, and murmurs of workers trying to slip unnoticed into another long day. Beneath this sheen of corporate pride moved a figure few paid attention to. A small, wiry woman dressed in a faded green cleaning uniform, her hair tucked beneath a plain scarf, her movements slow but deliberate. This woman was Clara Johnson, 60 years old, her back slightly stooped from years of labor, her eyes dark yet clear with a wisdom carved by hardship. To strangers, she looked like just another cleaner fading into the background. In truth, she was the mother of Daniel Hayes, a billionaire CEO known across the city, and she was here with one purpose: to test the woman her son intended to marry. Clara wheeled her cart carefully into the middle of the grand lobby, her hands wrapped around the handle as though she had always belonged there. The marble floor beneath her gleamed like still water, reflecting the chandeliers that hung overhead. Around her, young professionals clicked past in their polished shoes, some lowering their eyes, others glancing briefly at the cleaner and moving on, already forgetting she existed. But Clara had chosen this moment, this exact place, to set her stage. With a quiet flick of her wrist, she tilted the bucket just enough. Clear water sloshed out, spreading across the marble in a shimmering puddle that caught the light like a trap. She straightened slowly, resting on the mop as if steadying herself, and waited. The first to notice was Monica Hayes, striding into the lobby with her usual air of entitlement. She was in her late 20s, tall, slim, every strand of her auburn hair polished into place, her heels sharp against the floor. Her fitted red suit clung to her frame like a statement of power, and over her arm hung a designer handbag worth more than some employee's yearly salary. Beside her trailed Chloe Carter, a manager in her 30s with sleek blonde hair and a pale pink blouse, whose laughter always rose louder when Monica was near. Chloe had learned that her place at the company was secured not by merit, but by standing in Monica's shadow, and she played the role willingly. The sound of Monica's heels stopped short when she saw the water creeping toward her shoes. Her lips curled in disgust, and her eyes narrowed behind oversized sunglasses. Chloe followed her gaze, and within seconds, the two women locked onto Clara's small frame crouched near the bucket. Monica's voice, sharp and cutting, broke the hum of the lobby. She called out to the woman before her, words dripping with disdain, as though the simple sight of Clara bending to wipe the floor offended her sense of order. Chloe added a sneer, her voice lighter but cruel all the same, feeding Monica's superiority like a spark catching flame. Clara remained on her knees, rag in hand, wiping slowly at the marble as if nothing had been said. Her hands moved with a patience honed through decades of labor folding laundry for others, scrubbing floors, sewing clothes late into the night when her son was still small. Now, in this glittering tower, she looked less like a worker cleaning a spill, and more like a quiet witness to a truth waiting to unfold. Employees at the reception desk froze mid-gesture, their eyes darting nervously between Monica and the woman on the ground. A security guard shifted uneasily but stayed put, knowing Monica's influence was not to be challenged. The silence thickened, broken only by the clicking of Chloe's heels as she leaned closer, her voice dripping with mockery, as though Clara's bent figure existed solely for their amusement. Then, with a sudden motion, Monica kicked the bucket sideways. The sound of water splashing echoed through the lobby, spreading across the floor like an accusation. Clara staggered but held her balance, her frail body stiffening against the force. Chloe, emboldened, let her heel jab into Clara's side with a calculated cruelty, a movement quick enough to seem casual, yet sharp enough to leave pain behind. Gasps rippled faintly through the hall, though no one dared raise their voice. The marble now glistened with more water, a spreading pool that mirrored the ugliness of what had just been done. Monica adjusted her sunglasses, her lips twisting in satisfaction, as though she had proven some unspoken point about who belonged and who did not. Chloe smirked and folded her arms, proud of the role she had played in humiliating the woman before them. Around them, employees exchanged looks of disbelief, shame, and fear. No one stepped forward. In the hierarchy of this tower, silence was the safest response. From behind a column, Jasmine Brooks clutched her phone tightly. She was 19, a new intern, her dark curls tied in a loose bun, her cheap gray skirt slightly wrinkled from rushing to work. Jasmine's wide eyes brimmed with unease as she held the camera steady, recording what she saw. Her heart pounded, torn between fear of losing her job and the instinct that what was happening was wrong. She had endured Monica's sharp tongue herself just days before, and watching the older woman endure it now struck something deeper. She told herself she might never use the video, yet still she kept the lens steady, capturing every moment. Clara, meanwhile, did not cry out. She did not curse, nor did she look up with fury. Instead, she pressed her palm against her aching side, then lowered herself to pick up the rag once more. Her movements were slow, deliberate, unbroken by humiliation. Each stroke of the cloth across the marble seemed to erase not only water, but also the venom thrown her way. Her silence was not weakness. It was defiance. It was the strength of a woman who had survived storms far greater than the cruelty of a spoiled fiancée and her sycophant friend. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Monica and Chloe exchanged satisfied glances, certain they had put the cleaner in her place. Yet, for those who watched from the corners, it was Clara's calm that lingered most. Her refusal to retaliate, her quiet dignity, pierced sharper than any protest. The receptionist at the desk shifted uncomfortably, her fingers hovering above the keyboard but unable to type. Even the security guard lowered his gaze, ashamed at his own silence. As Clara wrung the rag and wiped again, the echoes of the bucket's crash still rang in the minds of those present. She was only a cleaner to them, but in her silence she revealed something deeper. A strength that made cruelty look small and compassion look immense. The employees would not forget the sight of her bent figure, the calm on her lined face, the way she absorbed humiliation without surrendering her dignity. And though Jasmine's video would remain hidden for now, the truth had already taken root in the silent stares and uneasy hearts of those who witnessed. When the last streak of water was gathered into her rag, Clara leaned back on her heels and exhaled softly. She didn't raise her head to meet the stares. She simply folded the rag in her lap and returned the bucket upright, her actions deliberate, controlled, as though nothing had happened. Yet in that silence, in that stillness, the entire lobby felt the weight of a moment they would never shake. The evening settled heavily over the city, shadows stretching across the skyline of Brookfield Tower as office lights blinked out one by one, leaving only the glow of distant traffic and the hum of late trains. Hours earlier, Clara had endured humiliation in that very lobby, her dignity tested by cruel words and sharper kicks, and though she had not retaliated, her heart carried the weight of the moment home with her. Now, in the quiet of her modest house at the edge of town, she sat at a wooden table scarred by years of use, a single lamp flickering beside her, and opened a leather-bound diary whose pages were worn soft by time. Her hands, roughened from decades of labor, steadied the pen as she began to write, each word a quiet record of the injustice she had suffered. She noted the polished shoes of Monica Hayes, the cutting voice that had filled the lobby, the sharp pain in her side when Chloe's heel found its mark, and the stillness of the crowd that chose silence over courage. The diary had always been her refuge, the place where she folded away memories too heavy to carry alone, and tonight it became both witness and confessor. Her pen scratched steadily, a rhythm that matched the steadiness of her breath, and with each sentence, her determination grew firmer. Memories from years past returned unbidden as the ink spread across the paper. She recalled long nights at a sewing machine, stitching dresses under dim light so her son could eat, the mornings spent selling fruit at a roadside stall in the biting cold, and the sacrifices she had made after her husband's death left her alone to raise a boy. Daniel Hayes, once a thin child clutching at her skirts, was now a man the world called powerful, a CEO whose name carried weight in boardrooms and on the front page of business magazines. And though Clara loved him fiercely, she knew that wealth and admiration from strangers could blind even the kindest heart to the flaws of those closest to him. The television in the corner filled the silence with polished voices. On the screen, Daniel appeared, a black man in a crisp suit, stepping out of a black car surrounded by cameras and flashing lights. The anchor's voice praised him as a visionary leader and a philanthropist admired for his compassion, the kind of man people trusted to bring not only profits, but also change. Footage followed of Daniel, the black CEO, smiling as he handed scholarships to young students, shaking hands at charity galas, and standing beside mayors and governors who spoke glowingly of his integrity. Clara watched, her chest tightening with pride, for the boy she had once soothed through fevers and hunger had grown into the man she had prayed he might become. Yet pride gave way to worry as her pen rested on the page. She whispered softly, almost to herself, that even the brightest future could be shadowed by the wrong partner. Monica had shown her disdain, not when cameras were watching, but when she believed she was humiliating a nobody. That cruelty, Clara knew, could seep into Daniel's life and undo everything he had built with his name and his character. The diary bore her resolve in neat, firm lines. She would not allow arrogance to destroy the son she had raised with blood and tears. The world might see Monica's beauty and grace, but Clara had seen the truth, and the truth would not remain hidden. Elsewhere in the city, another light burned long into the night. In a cramped dorm-style apartment, Jasmine Brooks sat hunched over her small desk, her phone glowing in her trembling hands. 19 years old, her round face pale with indecision, she replayed the clip she had captured that morning, her thumb hovering over the delete button more than once. The video showed Monica's heel striking the bucket, Chloe's cruel jab, and the old cleaner staggering but refusing to fall. Jasmine's breath caught each time she watched it, not only for the injustice of the act, but for the silence that had followed. She remembered how her own throat had closed, how fear had kept her rooted to the spot, and how shame now twisted in her stomach. Her room told the story of a girl on the edge of adulthood. Textbooks stacked unevenly, a half-eaten sandwich on a plate, a family photograph taped to the wall showing smiling parents who had sacrificed to send her to the city. She wanted to prove herself worthy, to keep the internship that might become a career, but the clip in her hands felt heavier than any paycheck. She imagined the consequences, Monica's wrath, Chloe's retaliation, the company dismissing her before she had even begun, and the thought made her fingers tremble. Yet she also imagined the cleaner's calm, the silent strength that seemed to say some truths were worth the risk. Jasmine placed the phone face down on the desk and buried her head in her hands, fighting back tears. The weight of choice pressed on her, and though she longed for courage, fear whispered that silence was safer. She thought of her parents back home, how disappointed they would be if she failed, and how proud they might be if she did what was right. Between those two extremes she hovered, unable to decide, the clip locked within her phone like a secret too dangerous to release. Her body shook with the tension of it, her breath shallow as she tried to push sleep into her weary frame. Back in her small kitchen, Clara closed her diary and laid the pen neatly across its cover. Her face was calm, but her heart carried a storm. She reached over and switched off the television, Daniel's smiling image fading into darkness, and let the silence of the night embrace her. She whispered a prayer that truth would find its way to light, even if it had to pass through pain first. Her gaze lingered on the diary, now heavy with words of determination, before she rose to prepare for bed. The night wrapped around both women, Clara in her resolve, Jasmine in her turmoil. One carried wisdom born of sacrifice, the other the hesitation of youth caught between fear and justice. And while the city slept, their fates quietly intertwined, bound by a single moment in a glittering lobby and a decision that would soon ripple far beyond the walls of Brookfield Tower. The following days carried with them an unease that hung over Brookfield Tower like a storm cloud. The lobby still gleamed, the glass walls still sparkled under the morning light, and the employees still filed through the doors in sharp suits and polished shoes. But beneath the surface, the air felt heavier, as if the echo of Clara's humiliation lingered in every corner. Though the staff had chosen silence on that day, the memory of what they had seen clung to them, and each time Monica's heels clicked against the floor, shoulders stiffened, and conversations fell into hushed tones. Clara, still in disguise, pushed her cleaning cart quietly through the halls, her eyes watching, her heart steady, and though she said nothing, she saw everything. Monica seemed emboldened by what had transpired in the lobby, as if proving her dominance over the cleaner had reinforced her sense of untouchable power. She carried herself with a sharper arrogance, her head held higher, her voice cutting more deeply into the lives of those beneath her. She prowled the open offices like a queen surveying her court, her designer suit jacket swaying with each turn, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently on desks as she scolded employees for mistakes so small they barely mattered. Chloe followed like a shadow, her laughter rising at every cruel remark, her arms crossed and her chin tilted as if mocking was a sport she had mastered. For the staff, the days became a cycle of dread. Monica found new targets with ease, secretaries who misfiled papers, assistants who typed too slowly, and interns who struggled under the weight of unrealistic demands. Yet no one bore the brunt more than Jasmine Brooks. The young intern tried her best to stay invisible, her eyes lowered, her notes meticulously kept, her lips pressed together in silence. But Monica seemed to notice her more with each passing day, as though sensing weakness and relishing the chance to expose it. On a gray Tuesday morning, Monica's voice rang out across the open floor when Jasmine mistakenly brought her the wrong draft of a presentation. In front of half the marketing team, Monica tore the paper in two, the sound loud and final, and tossed the pieces onto Jasmine's desk. Chloe smirked, chiming in with a taunt about competence, and the other employees glanced at one another but kept their eyes down. Jasmine's cheeks burned crimson as she gathered the torn sheets with trembling fingers, biting her lips so hard it nearly bled, her small frame hunched as though she could fold herself into nothingness. Clara, mopping the far corner, felt the scene like a knife across her own chest. 2 days later, Jasmine's voice cracked as she gave a nervous report in a meeting, stumbling over a figure she had rehearsed the night before. Monica interrupted mid-sentence, rolling her eyes, her words dripping with contempt as she questioned why the company should tolerate incompetence. Chloe laughed, tossing her hair back and adding that perhaps Jasmine belonged more with the janitorial staff than at a desk. The room stiffened, but no one defended the girl. Jasmine lowered her head, tears threatening but refusing to fall, her pen clutched so tightly it left indentations in her palm. Clara saw all of it. From her place along the edges of the office, broom in hand, she bore witness to every word, every sneer, every sharp dismissal. The disguise gave her freedom to watch unnoticed, and what she saw confirmed the depth of the cruelty. Monica did not simply lash out when provoked. She wielded humiliation like a weapon, cutting down those she considered beneath her to build herself higher. Chloe mirrored her every move, eager to prove loyalty, her laughter echoing like a second blade. For Clara, the truth became impossible to ignore. This was not about a single insult in a lobby, but a pattern of contempt that infected everyone who dared to stand too close. In the break room one afternoon, Jasmine sat alone at a small table, her untouched lunch in front of her. Her curls fell loose around her tired face, and her eyes were hollow, red-rimmed from nights spent replaying the same cruel moments in her mind. Her phone sat beside her plate, the clip of Monica and Chloe's attack on the cleaner still saved, still locked away like a weight she could not lift. She wanted to forget, to bury it, yet each new insult dragged it back into the light. Across the room, Clara entered quietly, her cart squeaking softly, and though Jasmine never looked up, Clara saw the heaviness in her shoulders and felt the unspoken bond of two women bound by the same cruelty. Monica's reign continued into the week's end, her arrogance swelling with each unchecked insult. She berated a secretary for using the wrong font, humiliated a junior executive for mispronouncing a client's name, and even mocked a security guard whose uniform had a loose button. Chloe applauded each performance, her voice rising in support, her presence amplifying Monica's cruelty like a spotlight. The staff grew quieter, retreating further into silence, knowing that any word of defense could make them the next target. Clara recognized that fear. She had seen it in factories, in markets, in neighborhoods where those with power stepped on the weak. Yet within Clara's silence, something stirred. As she watched Jasmine suffer, as she heard the laughter of Monica and Chloe ring through the halls, she understood more clearly that this was not simply about protecting her son from a cruel marriage. It was about the dignity of every person crushed beneath Monica's heel. Each insult was a wound, not only to the victim, but to the entire building, spreading like a contagion of fear and shame. Clara realized she carried not only her own truth, but the truth of many who could not speak. One late afternoon, as sunlight stretched long shadows across the marble, Clara paused her sweeping and let her eyes scan the floor where workers shuffled past with weary expressions. The tower looked the same as it always had. Glass walls, bright lights, sharp suits, but in its core it was unraveling, poisoned by arrogance. Clara pressed a hand against her cart, steadying herself, her mind clear. She had seen enough. The cruelty of Monica Hayes was not a private wound. It was a spreading stain, one that threatened to touch everyone. When the elevators closed for the night and the hum of computers faded, Clara returned to her small room, her diary waiting on the table. She opened it once more, the pen resting between her fingers, and wrote not only of her own pain, but of Jasmine's tears, the silence of the staff, the laughter of Chloe. The words carved themselves into the page with steady conviction. The truth had widened, and so had her resolve. She could not allow silence to remain the answer. The week reached its peak with the long-anticipated shareholders' meeting, the kind of event Brookfield Tower polished itself for, where every marble tile gleamed, every glass pane shone, and the air itself felt curated for wealth and power. The building was dressed like a stage, flower arrangements at every corner, banners with the company's insignia unfurled across the atrium, and waitstaff moving quietly with trays of crystal glasses. Beneath the grandeur, however, tension ran quietly like an undercurrent, carried in whispers and nervous glances between employees who still remembered the cruelty they had seen in the lobby days earlier. Clara Johnson, once again disguised, now wore a crisp vendor's apron and balanced a tray of drinks in her steady hands. Her frame was small but upright, her eyes calm but searching as she stepped into the storm of wealth and pride. Investors began to arrive in clusters, men in tailored suits and women in elegant dresses, their perfumes lingering in the air as they offered polite greetings to hosts and executives. Monica Hayes was radiant at the center of it all, her red sheath dress hugging her figure, diamonds glittering on her ears, and her red lips curving into the smile she had perfected for public admiration. She commanded the room with sweeping gestures, pointing staff toward decorations slightly off-center, barking orders to fix trays, and correcting even the smallest details with an authority that felt less like leadership and more like domination. Chloe Carter remained faithfully at her side, her pale blouse tucked neatly, her heels clicking in perfect time, and her laughter punctuating Monica's sharp remarks like an echo chamber for cruelty. Clara moved slowly through the lobby, offering glasses with a practiced hand, her gray hair tucked neatly beneath a plain scarf. Few gave her more than a passing glance. To them she was part of the scenery, invisible yet essential, a faceless worker in a sea of grandeur. Yet her heart remained steady, her eyes sharp, watching how Monica treated those who had no power. She noted each impatient wave, each sharp word, and each dismissive look that Monica cast at staff who worked to keep the event flawless. Clara knew her role now was not to provoke but to observe, and she held the tray like a shield as she lingered near the edges of the gathering. As the event swelled, the weight of Monica's arrogance fell hardest on the workers. Near the refreshment table, a young waiter with trembling hands set down a tray slightly askew, and Monica's voice cut through the hum of conversation, commanding him to do it again, louder, sharper, until heads turned. Chloe leaned close and muttered something mocking, drawing nervous laughter from a pair of guests unsure how to respond. Clara watched, her heart tightening, for the boy could not have been older than 19, his cheeks pale with shame. It was the same cycle again. Power used not to lead, but to humiliate. Then came Clara's moment. Carrying her tray toward a group of investors, she misjudged the step, or perhaps allowed herself to move just slowly enough that Monica's eyes caught her. Monica's tone sharpened instantly, her words rising over the chatter of the lobby, scolding the older woman for moving too slowly, for risking embarrassment in front of such important guests. Chloe chimed in, her smirk broadening as if adding weight to Monica's superiority. The room fell quieter, not silent but subdued, as guests turned subtly to see the spectacle. Clara bowed her head, murmured a quiet apology, and shifted the tray to steady it, her dignity intact despite the sting of humiliation. At that precise moment, a ripple passed through the room. Someone near the back gasped softly, and then a murmur spread as screens mounted around the lobby flickered. A video had begun to play, unplanned, unscheduled, but unmistakable. Jasmine's clip, shaky but clear, filled the monitors. Monica in her heels, Chloe at her side, Clara in her cleaning uniform, the bucket splashing across the marble floor, and the cruel kick into the side of an elderly woman. The room froze. Drinks held halfway to lips, conversation suspended mid-sentence as the truth unfolded larger than life before them. The sound from the clip echoed harshly in the grand space. The sharp words, the splash of water, the ragged silence that followed. Guests shifted uncomfortably, investors exchanged stunned looks, and employees lowered their eyes, shame burning in their faces for their earlier silence. Clara, standing only steps away from Monica, kept her head lowered, her hand steady on the tray, as if nothing had changed, though her heart raced with the weight of revelation. Chloe's face drained of color, her mouth opening but no words coming, while Monica's eyes darted frantically across the room, searching for an explanation, a lifeline, something to break the spell of the footage. Then Daniel Hayes entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal suit immaculate, his presence always drew attention, but today the room's gaze turned on him for a different reason. He strode in with confidence, but as his eyes lifted to the screens, his steps faltered. The clip played again, and he watched the frame of an old cleaner bending, the water spreading, the cruelty raining down. His jaw tightened, his brow furrowed, and in the subtle tilt of his head, a recognition formed. That bent frame, those careful hands, that quiet endurance, he knew them, not as a cleaner but as the woman who had raised him. Whispers surged around him like waves against stone. Investors leaned in, murmuring questions. Staff exchanged nervous glances. Monica tried to smile, tried to wave the moment away as a technical mishap, but her voice caught in her throat. Chloe tugged at her sleeve, panic clear in her eyes. Yet Daniel remained still, his gaze locked on the screen, his mind piecing together the fragments of what he saw with the clarity of a son who knew his mother's every gesture. The realization struck him with the force of a blow. The woman humiliated before his fiancée was no stranger. It was Clara. The air in the lobby grew thick, suffocating, as silence spread deeper. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, his lips pressed into a thin line, but he did not yet speak. Around him, the weight of the revelation pressed on every soul present, investors shifting in discomfort, employees staring at the floor, and Monica standing frozen in the harsh light of truth. Clara still held her tray, her posture calm though her heart pounded, and in that moment the balance of power shifted silently, as a son recognized his mother beneath the disguise and the entire tower held its breath. The echo of the video lingered in the air like a haunting melody, every whisper and gasp weaving tension into the grand lobby of Brookfield Tower. Daniel Hayes stood frozen, his eyes locked on the screens that had just revealed the cruel humiliation of a woman who was far more than a nameless cleaner. He felt the truth pierce him with painful clarity, the tilt of her shoulders, the calmness of her movements, the quiet endurance. It was his mother. Around him, investors shifted uncomfortably, the hum of disbelief rising, and Monica's painted smile faltered, her mask slipping under the weight of too many eyes. Clara Johnson, still holding her tray, drew a long breath, and with a steadiness that silenced the room, she straightened to her full height. With deliberate hands, Clara set the tray down on a nearby table. She reached for the ties of her apron, unfastening them slowly, every gesture echoing in the hush of the room. The fabric slipped away, followed by the plain scarf, until she stood revealed, not as a cleaner but as the mother of the CEO who now stared at her with wide eyes. The audience drew in a collective gasp, a ripple of shock passing across the rows of finely dressed guests. A woman some had dismissed minutes ago as invisible was suddenly at the center of every gaze, her dignity intact, her identity undeniable. The mask had fallen, but it was not hers. Monica's face drained of its practiced charm, her lips parted, searching for words that would not come, her eyes darting between Daniel and the gathered investors. Chloe Carter, usually so quick to echo her friend's cruelty, fumbled with her blouse collar, her laugh dying before it could escape, her body shrinking under the weight of exposure. Their confidence, once sharpened into weapons, crumbled before the truth that now stood unshaken before them. Daniel's gaze swept over them, cold and unyielding, and in that moment, silence was louder than any accusation. An investor near the front row shifted forward, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light, his eyes narrowing at Monica as if reassessing every word she had ever spoken. Another whispered to a colleague, their conversation barely hushed. "That's his mother. She's his mother." The words spread like fire across the hall. Monica tried to compose herself, attempted a faltering explanation about misunderstanding, about stress and pressure, but her voice cracked, and Chloe's trembling agreement only deepened the humiliation. They were cornered not by fists or fury, but by truth itself. Daniel stepped forward, his shoes striking the marble with a weight that commanded the room. His face, usually calm in public, was taut with restrained anger. He looked first at his mother, then at Monica, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried across the hall with the steady strength of judgment. He declared that the engagement was over, that no partnership built on arrogance and cruelty could be allowed to stain his life or his company. He told the gathered investors that contracts could be lost and profits could falter, but integrity was not for sale, and he would not trade his mother's dignity for wealth. His words struck with the finality of a gavel, and the room responded with a hush deeper than silence. Chloe wilted beside Monica, her loyalty crumbling as Daniel's order rang out. She was dismissed from the company, effective immediately. Her face, once smug with shared cruelty, was pale and trembling now, her hands clutching each other as she realized the shadow she had followed had led her to ruin. Monica, stripped of her carefully built image, could only stand in stunned disbelief, her future unraveling in the space of a single sentence. The power she had wielded so confidently evaporated before the eyes of those she once sought to impress. From the back of the hall, Jasmine Brooks felt her heart pound as the moment unfolded. She had never expected her small act of courage to echo this far, but the truth had been unleashed, and she could no longer hide in the shadows. With trembling steps, she walked forward, her youthful face pale but determined, her curls framing eyes that shone with fear and resolve. She raised her hand slightly and confessed, her voice quiet but clear, that she was the one who had recorded the video. Gasps rippled again, but her words did not falter. She admitted it was her, a powerless intern, who had chosen to bear witness when others had stayed silent. Clara's eyes softened as she stepped toward Jasmine, her arms opening in quiet embrace. She pulled the trembling girl into her hold, whispering words that carried across the room like a gentle hymn. She told her that truth always needed those brave enough to speak, that courage was not measured by strength, but by the willingness to stand when silence was easier. Jasmine's tears broke free, her shoulders trembling, but relief flooded her as the older woman's arms steadied her. For the first time, the hall saw not an intern or a cleaner, but two women bound by courage. Investors began to murmur, some nodding, some clapping softly, the atmosphere shifting from shock to a strange, reverent respect. Clara lifted her gaze to them, her voice low but firm as she reminded them that power could build towers of glass, but only kindness could build a foundation strong enough to last. Her words echoed with the authority not of position but of truth, and heads bowed slightly as if acknowledging a lesson they had long forgotten. The cruelty that had reigned in silence was now broken by the undeniable force of dignity. Daniel stood taller, his eyes glistening as he looked at his mother and the young intern at her side. In them he saw the strength of the values he had been raised with, the foundation that had built not only his life but his vision for the company. His voice steadied as he repeated what now seemed obvious. Contracts could be replaced, deals could be rebuilt, but the way one treated the weakest among them defined the worth of everything else. Investors nodded, some clapping louder now, the verdict settling not just as his alone, but as a collective truth. The gathering ended not with the triumphant conclusion Monica had envisioned, but with a moment of clarity that spread through the hall. Clara's embrace of Jasmine, Daniel's judgment, and the silent fall of arrogance all combined into a lesson no one present would forget. The tower gleamed as it always had, but beneath its light a deeper truth now shone brighter, that power could disguise itself for a time, but the way one treated the unseen, the humble, and the weak revealed the true measure of character. Clara had proven that dignity, compassion, and courage could unmask arrogance in the grandest of halls. In the end, this story is not only about arrogance unmasked, but about those who quietly rise above prejudice, who carry compassion even when the world offers cruelty, and who sacrifice in silence so others may stand tall. They remind us that true worth is never measured by power or wealth, but by the kindness we show to those who seem invisible. Take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments, because your voice may inspire someone else. Subscribe to our channel to walk with us through more stories of courage and humanity. And may God bless you and your loved ones with peace, dignity, and compassion.